What's a podcast to do when it's scheduled to air, and yet two of the cast members have suffered from technical or life issues? Well, it's time for a flashback episode. How about one with Grace Moreau? Grace and the Plague Doctors of Paris. This is Gothic. Well, let us go to Paris.
Allons-y.
And to the Paris Opera House. Nothing quite like the Paris Opera House for Gothic architecture.
So the images, if you do a Google image search of the Palais Garnier, one of the more popular ones is that like famous double staircase that like comes down and it like merges into one staircase.
Mm-hmm.
And I once fell asleep accidentally on the bottom step of that opera house. This is Sharon in real life, not Grace. I was very jet lagged.
Nice. Did anyone wake you up?
I just like laid down on my back on the step, and I've never felt marble that was so comfortable.
At the point at which this little flashback takes place, where are you at in your training?
Golly.
Are you early on? Have you been doing it for a while?
I'm thinking probably fairly early on. I don't think Grace was one of these people who was like from a super early age raised to it. Grace is also in this time period a black woman, so there's some baggage that comes with that. But yeah, I guess I was picturing being more early on in my training.
So you are at ingenue phase rather than star of the stage.
Yes.
The opera house itself is still somewhat astonishing to you. Its soaring ceilings, the red curtains of the stage itself, the high layered tiers of the wealthy and the influential in their VIP boxes, and the crowd stretching out in front of the stage are all still also new to you. And also this idea that there are real monsters in the world is still also new to you too. How did you come to find out about this? How did you get inducted into the sect of the Barbazines?
I was kind of picturing some kind of traveling Parisian. God, I just had the word. Fancy boy, a traveling Parisian fancy boy.
Fancy boy.
A fancy boy who is coming to America to see the fancy new American.
Okay.
I named him Anton Berger. So he has ended up being the both my voice instructor and my instructor in my kind of immediate superior in the Barbazine.
So, you are still impressed by all of this stuff.
Absolutely.
So in this flashback, we find ourselves at the great opera house in Paris. Outside, the lights always shine upon its facade, for the light must always shine upon art. And inside, the great chandeliers hang low from the high, high ceilings. Their wedding cake layers of light illuminating the frescoes and the gilding and the beautiful mosaics upon the walls, while even so the hallways seem weighty with the voices that have passed there, with the power brokers that have wandered these great halls. And this is after a show. You were not in it, but you, as was your wont, you lingered near the stage or sometimes in the back of the auditorium, checking the acoustics at all points to see how voices sounded, because you do quite enjoy the singing part, a singing that you never thought you would be able to perform in front of an audience such as those that gather here, but yet which your mentor has promised that one day, if you listen to him well, you will. But your mentor is not currently about. He was called off for some reason, but he felt that you were probably okay to be left upon your own at the Opera House. But
Cool.
the show is now over. Most of the audience has gone out, at least into the grand front halls, where they are hobnobbing with one another and with the singers. But there is something about the theater itself, the stage, the chairs all arrayed in rows, the tiers of the private boxes above, that is also just so very, what's a good word here?
It's the symmetry.
Yes, there you go. Symmetry. You like the symmetry of it. The beauty of the voices coming from the stage at first, and then the clamor of the crowd as they rise to their feet and applaud and then talk with one another about the show, and then the silence that follows. And so you are basking in that a bit when you hear a shout from behind the curtains, which are now closed. The great curtains are.
Where am I standing in the room? I thought you said I was in the back of the room.
Sure, that's fine.
So I hear. Okay, so I hear a sound from behind the curtains.
A shout.
A shout. What kind of shout?
One that is cut off, and then there is a heavy thump.
Well, that sounds.
Well, almost at the same time as it is cut off, there is a heavy thump. Wait, let me give you a heavy thump. There you go.
Patrick, are you okay? No, kidding. Well, accidents happen in the theater all the time. There's all kinds of ropes and pulleys and sets and props back there. Somebody might have hurt themselves. I'd like to go towards the stage and.
So you make your way down from the far end of the seating, of the regular seating, down through all of the chairs and everything, and up onto the stage, and then push aside the heavy, heavy curtains, and make your way into the backstage area where the lighting is very dim. It's not non-existent, but it's very dim. Just a few lamps lit here and there, and you see actually on the stage, indeed, what you feared, which is that one of the sandbags has fallen from its high struts, its high supports, and apparently directly over a stagehand who is lying prone on the ground with the sandbag and spilled sand next to him.
I would like to hurry over and move the sandbag off of him.
Not a difficult thing to do. I mean, it's the sandbag has mostly, the sand is kind of drained out of it, so it's easy to push off of the stagehand.
Okay, cool.
He is groaning and says a few words that are difficult to make out, but sound like something like Edgar. And you know that, as it turns out then, Edgar is the name of the stage manager.
Gasp.
Who would have been back here at the time, probably. This guy's saying something, and it's really hard to tell what. But if you want to do and investigate a mystery, you might be able to get more information out of him.
Sure. I'm gonna investigate a mystery by being like, are you alright? Do you need Edgar? Investigate a mystery is plus sharp. I rolled a 6. So that's great. Hey, question. Do I mark experience during a flashback?
Yes.
Okay, dope.
In the Scooby game, I let them mark experience and even gain new powers in the past that they don't have until they come back from the flashback.
Cool.
So in investigating a mystery, it says on a miss, you reveal some information to the monster or whoever you're talking to, or the keeper might ask you some questions which you have to answer.
Oh, so it's like a reverse investigate a mystery. The mystery investigates me.
Yeah. So I
Inzipele
would,
Gagne,
here's what
the
I would
mystery
ask
investigation.
is, um, given your training, would you have been likely to, as soon as you see the guy fall, or see this guy, sandbagged uh,
Mhm.
on the stage, would you have drawn your weapons?
At this point in my training, I'm picturing probably not. I think probably my voice training has come first, and when I've proven that I can, do things like have my stance and breathing properly, then the fighting
Do you
eyes
even
come in.
have weapons?
Um, probably I do. Maybe I have the silver knife. Maybe that could be like it's obviously probably not a great idea to initiate somebody into this sect and have them potentially encounter monsters unarmed.
So you have the silver dagger, but not the fighting
The
sticks.
Not the fighting sticks.
Okay.
Plus, a knife can be, stowed discreetly on one's person without necessarily being like, "Hey, look, I'm carrying a weapon."
Yeah, he says something, but you don't quite make it out, and then he passes out.
He passes out.
Hmm.
Okay.
He falls unconscious. He is unable to provide any more information to you due to your ridiculously low roll.
Out of the zero information that he provided me, I start doing that like panic, like mini slaps on his face, like, "Hello, hello, are you all right?" And then I do one of those like, "Help! Somebody needs help over here!" shouting over my shoulder.
At that, though, you hear the release of a rope, and that
No,
rope, as it comes like fizzing through a pulley system, and you look
can
up
I
and you see a sandbag coming straight for you.
dodge out of the way?
You need to act under pressure.
Oh, good, cool. My lowest stat.
Well, so you're killed in the past, and none of the
Oh,
none
good.
of the
This is
present
great.
stuff happens. That's a bummer. We're gonna have to redo the entire show. You failed, didn't you?
It's a 7 minus 1.
Awesome.
I like dodge the wrong direction and I like go directly into its path.
Yes, you dodge the wrong direction, and you trip on the stagehand, in fact, and kind of fall backwards a little bit from that. And it doesn't hit you full on. It doesn't crush you underneath it, but the sandbag does strike you for.
Knock the wind out of me kind of thing.
Well, it hits you for 1 point of harm, not armor defeating.
I have 1 armor, which I had kind of thought about modifying into like all those ridiculous layers of like brocade and whalebone
Okay.
and like all that kind of stuff. It's just like built into my dresses. Maybe I've got some mail under there, a mail corset. I mean, and sometimes on stage you have to get dressed up in armor, even if like there's armor costumes for women and stuff like that. So
So actually, yeah, you are knocked aside by the sandbag, but you're actually protected by the layers of whalebone and corsets and pre-Kevlar that is woven into your dress, which isn't as fancy a dress as you would be wearing if you were going to be on stage. But your mentor insists that you look the part of a star at all times.
actually, that's very fair.
He likes to say, this, Grace, this is what it is. You must be the star before you can be the star.
Be the star.
Be the star. Now you're a star lying on the floor with sand poured all over you,
Oh, I'm a fallen star.
and you see a dark figure darting through the shadows and deeper into the shadows away from you across the backstage. And there's something not right about the shape. It's a little bit too bulky in places where it shouldn't be, it's a little bit too thin in places where it shouldn't be.
Okay, I want to uh, scramble to my feet and just kind of stare after it and see if it's going to come back. Because kind of my immediate thing is like, oh my god, Anton's not here. I've just seen a thing that's not supposed to be here. This guy's in trouble. There's no one else around. And I'm like freezing. I'm standing over the guy who's on the ground.
Bad situation.
Okay, lots of rolls
Maybe
for me
see if you
today.
can raise your level in this flashback.
This is great. I get to do all the rolling because nobody else is here. Haha, Jesse and Nathan. 8 plus 1 is 9. 9. I think what I'm going to ask is what's the best way to protect the victims? Because Sharon would like to ask, are there any dangers I haven't noticed? But I think Grace is fixated on this thing and is just not thinking about her surroundings.
Well, you're kind of going to get the answer to both of those things all at once. Because, although, yes, you do have your stagehand here who has been hit by a sandbag, and you also hear voices of perhaps the other stagehands. You hear people talking in normal voices coming this way
Okay,
from
cool.
the opposite direction of where the dark shadowy figure went. But in that direction of the dark shadowy figure, you also hear some muffled, not screaming, but shouting perhaps, but it's very, very muffled, as if someone were trying to scream with a gag in their mouth or something like that. And
Oh,
then
good.
you also hear the sound of something being dragged across the stage floor there in the back. Something heavy, like a victim.
Oh my god, I'm noping so hard right now. Well, I think my first instinct at this point in my training is like, I need Anton. I need to pass this up the line. I'm not supposed to be like a solo operative yet. And what I'm gonna do is put my knife back away and like shout for the guys who I hear approaching and get them to take care of the dude who's already been felled by the sandbag and kind of, explain the situation breathlessly and be on the verge of tears because that's a good tool when you're a young lady.
Yeah, 3 or 4 of the other stagehands come in. It looks like they were just out on a smoke break before coming back to finish up the cleanup. And they see the sandbags on the stage, and they see you crying over the body of this unconscious
I'm just
stagehand.
like, he got hit by a sandbag and I don't know if he's okay. I don't know where my teacher is and is he going to be all right? In French.
They do a little freaking out of their own, but there's some minor first aid given, and then within, say 10 minutes or so, a doctor shows up, having been summoned from nearby, perhaps even having attended the event earlier, and having been caught before he got onto his carriage.
Cool.
Out in the street. And the stagehand, whom we'll call Louis, is bandaged up and taken off to convalesce somewhere. Also, questions are asked of you as to whether you are, in any way hurt. Of course, others ask you if you know what happened, what's going on.
I repeat the same thing that I just heard a noise, and I came back here, and he had clearly been hit by a sandbag, and then another one fell down, which is largely why I'm crying. But I do insist that I'm okay, and that I insist that I was not hit by the sandbag.
Okay.
And that I'm unhurt. But I would like to maybe grab somebody's sleeve and ask them if they've seen Anton, because he was in the building earlier. And I feel like my immediate thing needs to be to find him.
Anton is, it's not going to be soon before he can be here. He's going to, he's out and about somewhere, and
Okay.
He'll have to be hunted down. So
All right.
at best, it's probably going to be an hour or two before he can be tracked down.
Okay. What I'm kind of hoping for is that maybe somebody else will go find Anton so that, I at least don't have to go into the darkness of wherever that thing went, not knowing whether I'm going to get reinforcements. But
the way I gather this is not all of the singers even are part of the Barbazines. Yes?
yeah, especially just really, really background minor. If you're an opera singer who's famous enough to be, scheduled every season and given leading roles every so often, you have a pretty good chance of being approached about participating if you're interested. But definitely not all of them.
I'm going to be taking one of my hard moves, since I get to do that on failures on your part.
Oh, good.
And I have several to choose from this evening.
Oh, good. That's so comforting.
And say that, in fact, all of the performers who are also Barbazines are at after parties and unavailable
Oh,
on
great.
swift notice.
Okay, that's wonderful.
So it's an hour wait for Anton, given what you find out from people who seem to know where he is. Judging from where he went, which was to a dinner of potential influential and wealthy patrons who could help the Barbazines, which is why he went out on an opera night.
This is also a very important function of the Barbazines, is to schmooze with rich people. All right, well, I want to insist that somebody send a courier after him anyway, but I am at this point making the decision to go after that thing that I saw.
So by the time you start sending word out for Anton, it's been a good solid half hour since the events went down.
Yeah, but yeah, that's just what I'm fixated on at this point in my training, is that I'm just like, I need to report this. I need to report this.
Are you going to wait then for Anton to show up?
No, I am not. I am sending word that, what would a coded message look like? Probably something along the lines of, your student is in distress and would request your presence backstage at the Palais Garnier. Yeah, that sounds fine. And then I'm gonna tap one of the other stagehands and point where I saw the thing and be like, where does that go?
Actually, this is something you don't need to ask.
Oh, cool. Do I know this?
I envision you knowing, the basics of the place. And in fact,
Okay,
even
totally.
some of its secrets, because you are Barbazine, so you know
Yeah.
that the secret rooms and the tunnels and such under the opera house are real, although those have been closed off by the Barbazine to uninitiated eyes.
Yes.
But the ways into them are still known. And you know that really the only place that that section of backstage could go is, well, to what everybody else would think would be nowhere. Just, dead ends and blank walls. But there are paths that go down into the old spaces where the Phantom once ruled.
Well, in that case, I'm going to follow. I'm going to look for any kind of markings, or I'm thinking about like scrapes in the dust, since I heard something being dragged, potentially more spilled sand. Just kind of anything to figure out. I figure I probably know how to get to the entrance to the secret passages, but then I don't know if there's like a tracking.
Well, it's essentially it's going to be investigate a mystery.
All right, investigate a mystery. Where did it go? Oh, yeah! 12!
Hey, that's 2 failures put together.
Shut up.
Okay, fine. It's a full success.
Yes, where did it go, first of all?
Quite clearly the drag marks, which show some signs of struggle as well,
Oh, good. That's comforting.
go to a section of floorboard that can be pried up and reveal a ladder that goes down into the old sections.
I'm going to pry it up and go down the ladder, I think.
Down you go, and oh, it is dark down there. You do happen to know that there are lamps and even the occasional torch down there left over from the old days, but none of those are lit. So whatever came this way in darkness.
Would it be reasonable to say I carry a method of making fire, like matches or something?
Do you feel that would be reasonable to say?
Sure. Let's say that's like a thing of the Barbazines you have to have.
I would also let you, if you don't want to go too far to try to find, one of the lamps or something to light, you could retreat briefly to grab one of the lime lights from
yes, I'm going to do that.
because those are going to be more like lantern-like. Actually kind of bulky even, and the light that they shed is going to be a yellowish green.
Spooky. Cool. I've got that. I'm going back down the ladder and then lighting it and then taking a look around.
The drag marks are still quite present, especially in the dust of these lower levels. However, it's the other footprints that are somewhat disturbing to you. The other markings that aren't the drag marks of Edgar dragged along somewhere. And those might require you to use your other hold.
Okay. What sort of creature is
That's
it?
the one I was thinking you might
I was
choose.
thinking about that earlier, but I didn't think it made sense at the time, so.
It appears that there was one figure dragging Edgar. But then, as you follow these tracks down this dark hall, the yellow-green light of the hissing limelight projector in front of you, and I can't wait to see some fan art of this because I think it has to have like a whole backpack kind of set up for the thing to work properly. But
I just like rip it out of the stage.
yes.
This is mine now.
That is shining a cone of yellowish green light ahead of you. And in that rather grotesque lighting, you see how at various convergence points of other narrow hallways, because this section of the underworld was mostly just used for the Phantom to move from place to place quickly. No large rooms here, just narrow halls. But off of the main one, you see that at least 2, maybe 3 other sets of these tracks join with the main set. And all of them are definitely and very distinctly not human. In fact, they look very much, except for the size,
Oh no.
rat feet.
Oh god. It's funny because I share and think rat feet are like super adorable.
True.
But that would be really weird to see in the. Okay, I'm oh, okay. All right. I think Grace is super creeped out, and ooh, spoopy. I would grab one of my rats, but they're in the other room. Okay, so there's 3 of them, is what I'm seeing.
At least. Well, yeah, it looks like 3.
So I kind of pause at that, and I'm like, all right. I think what I want to do is gather some information and then go back to the surface while I will wait for Anton. Because especially now that there's 3 of them, I don't want to have an actual confrontation. I want to have something, to present him with so that I didn't just stand there watching this thing disappear into the dark and have nothing to tell him.
Which would be also very good if I didn't have a couple of more hard moves that I could use against you.
I die in the past, guys. I'm so sorry. I'm nuffled to death by giant rats.
As you are headed down the hallway, you suddenly realize that where there were 3 sets of tracks dragging a body, now there's just 2. And at that moment, you hear a sound right next to you, and you whirl, but there is a 5-foot-tall bipedal rat already leaping upon you, clawing and pounding at you with its gnarled, long, gangling hands, and it's ripping at you, and it's also hitting you over the head with a stage spike.
I'm gonna shove the limelight in its face.
Unfortunately, this is a hard move,
Oh, damn.
and so I get to deal damage to you before you get to react.
Oh, okay. All right.
You take 2 points of harm, not armor defeating.
Not armor defeating.
Right.
So was the other harm that I had from the sandbag
did not count because it didn't.
That didn't count.
Right.
Okay, so this one's not armor defeating.
In Monster of the Week terms, you actually took 0 harm from that earlier one, which can do things, which in that case knocked you down and caused you to sprawl, but it didn't do any lasting damage to you.
Yeah, like having the breath knocked out of you kind of thing. Okay, so now I have 2 not armor defeating, so I have 1 armor, so I have 1.
So you have 1 harm, yeah.
Harm.
So that one does rip cloth and skin in places, and you take a pretty hard thump upside the head.
I also scream. I'm a soprano. I can scream very loudly.
But you scream in alto.
I scream in alto, like it's a different language.
And the words of your mentor come back to you. Grace, this is important. You must always use weapons at hand. This is not always the weapons you are trained in, not always the weapons you would like to use, but you must be flexible. You must, as you use your voice in so many ways, you must also use your surroundings and whatever is at hand.
Yeah, I'm shoving the limelight in its face. I'm thinking about blinding it, but, it is actually an open flame. So...
Kick some ass.
Woo! Come on, dice, don't fail me now. They failed me. They failed me, Patrick. They failed me real bad. I got a 5 total. I realized just now that the limelight was connected to the stage, and I haven't had it this whole time. Oh, God.
Sorry.
I'm gonna die in the past. It's ridiculous.
You take 2 more points of harm. That is before armor. And the rat thing just freaks out. Just goes kind of crazy, but its own momentum has already thrown it onto you, and you both go stumbling backwards, and you smash into the far wall, which is wood and stone, at the same time that the rat thing smashes you in the head with the spike, and you drop the lantern, which immediately flares and goes out in a burst of light, and then you lose consciousness.
Oh, great.
Great flashback, everybody.
Oh, huzzah. Past Grace is very successful and doesn't fail at anything ever.
Actually, though, you don't lose consciousness for very long, and when you come back to, it's only the awareness that you are thinking to yourself that you realize that you are conscious because you can't see anything. It's still in darkness.
I can, feel myself blinking, that kind of thing.
But you feel like you're still more or less where you were, but you don't sense the presence of the rat thing nearby anymore.
No, little claws standing on me or anything like that. Or big claws, I guess. Rat claws are very little. Actual sized, non-anthropomorphic rat claws. Cool. I mean, after a period where I, make sure I don't have any legs broken or anything like that, I'm gonna get the hell out of there. Actually, wait, do I feel like I feel like I'm still in the same place, right? I haven't moved.
Right. And in fact, as you're moving around, you feel the lantern with your foot.
Yeah, I'm skedaddling. I'm going back the way I came, by memory, only a few touches of my fingertips upon the walls, and finding the ladder and going up and getting out of the trapdoor.
Guess what I get to do? Oh, look how many hard moves I have.
Oh, a hard move! It's so many hard moves.
You get turned around in the dark, and you go longer than you expected to have to, and you don't find the ladder.
I swear the ladder was here somewhere.
But you do find a door, and you realize there's light coming from beyond it.
Oh my god. I thought you were going to say a dead body. You do find a dead body.
No.
That's comforting. Okay, I find a door. There's light coming from around it.
And it's flickering, flamey kind of light, not anything steady like a lantern or even candlelight. It's more like brazier fire.
I'm going to suppress my immediate instinct to open it and rush through, and I'm going to listen through the door and see if I can hear, normal human voices and not squeaky rat noises.
You hear a lot of noises. It is a swishing of fur on fur, of bodies against bodies, of chittering, and the squeaks and guttural noises of inhuman things.
All right, back into the dark. I'm going away from the door.
And also the muffled screams of a human.
Oh no. Oh no. Oh man. I don't think very much time has passed. That's not the sense that I got. I don't think Anton's probably here yet. I was really determined to leave. Is there enough space under the door that I can peek under it?
You can give it a try and investigate a mystery if you so desire.
Alright, come on, Bone Dice. Don't be haunted, please. Ha-ha! That's a sharp, right? I got a 12.
Nice. Hold 2.
I feel like all of these questions are kind of obvious.
If you'd rather read a bad situation, you could do that too. I don't know, whichever one you... Well, either way, you'd still have the hold 2, I believe.
Yeah, let's say I read a bad situation instead of investigated a mystery. Because I kind of know what's on the other side of the door. I just don't know what the setup is. Let's say I'm going to ask, I think... That's rat language. I'm going to say, what's the best way to protect the victims? Because I'm fighting with my desire to wait for Anton, but I also don't know if this guy will survive that time. So, do I stay or do I go?
You open the door a crack, just enough to kind of peek through, and you do see a large chamber. Once it had desks or other, furniture in it. There's still remnants of that. There's papers everywhere. There's posters on the walls, but all faded.
Papers are in nests now.
and a lot of those papers have been shredded and are in piles on the floor. And this is obviously a nest of sorts for these creatures, of which there are perhaps a dozen.
Oh no.
And they are swarming over the poor form of Edgar, the stage manager. And Edgar is not having a good day.
Poor Edgar.
Edgar is not having a good day. He is being killed with many small slashes and cuts and scrapes and bites.
Oh no.
And nibbles across his body. His clothes are shredded. His hair is partially pulled out. His one eye is apparently gouged out. And it is a horrific scene lit by two coal braziers that looks like the rat things have probably found here, but the coal probably came from some of the dressing rooms for the fireplaces.
Yeah.
And you just see them swarming over Edgar. And then they look up and see you.
Ah, God damn it.
So the best way to protect the victim actually is, at this point, you can't fight them. Your best bet is to draw them away from Edgar.
All right, what's my best way out?
Now that you've looked into this room, you know it. You haven't been here, but you've seen it on maps that Anton has drawn for you or that has shown you from the archives, and you know the route back to the ladder, and it's a pretty straight run. There's a couple of jogs that you wouldn't have known to make necessarily because you got caught up in tracking the creatures earlier on and weren't really paying attention to the turns you were making. But
that's reasonable.
But now that you know where you are, you know how to get back.
Do you mean like grab him and run, or like draw them away and leave him lying there?
If they're all capable of dealing the kind of damage that you experienced just from the one, I gotta say that your chances don't look good if you try to go in there and grab him and get him out.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. It's full of desks and papers.
I mean, they're coming. They look like they're quite happily come for you, and look like they would do it en masse.
Does Edgar, by my estimation, look like he, if they were to stop swarming over him, could get up and leave?
Strangely, yes.
It's all like lacerations and stuff. No,
yeah,
like,
it seems more
damage.
like they're not teasing him, but they're not killing him. They're just wanting him to hurt. It looks like. I mean, otherwise he would already have been, dead.
Here's my other question: how far are the braziers from the door?
From you?
Yeah.
They're set about midway across the room, which isn't a huge room, but you're looking at maybe 8 or 9 feet.
Okay. And I think I'm pretty sure they're faster than I am. So, alright, then I'm just gonna slam the door open and wave my arms and shriek at them. And I think what I'm shrieking is, Edgar, get ready to run or something like that. I'm going to make sure I have all of their attention, which I assume I do. And as soon as I see the first one start to pounce, turn and just book it in the opposite direction towards the ladder.
As long as you're acting on the information that you get a +1 going forward. I'd say act under pressure here.
Okay, I'm acting under pressure. Oh, right, cool. My least good stat. Guess what? I rolled. It's still a 6.
Good Lord. You're making it really hard for me to keep you alive to, continue with the rest of the show.
I'm channeling Nathan here tonight. This is it? Oh, man. Freaking A. Oh, well.
So, you run. You run like you don't recall ever having run before. And you're running in the dark because, and you hear them behind you. You hear them skittering across the walls, across the floor, across each other as they come for you. You glance over your shoulder once and imagine or see the green glow of their eyes in the darkness. You stumble, but you get up. You're not used to your heavier than even normal clothing yet.
It's a new dress.
And so it feels like you're being dragged down. It feels like you're running through a dream. And for a moment, you hope that you actually are dreaming all of this and that you will wake up and it's just a nightmare caused by the stories that Anton has been telling you. But you don't wake up.
Did the opera have giant rat people?
You keep running. You careen off a wall, take a corner. You careen off another wall and take another corner. You know that the ladder is just up ahead, but you can almost feel their breath on the back of your neck as you're running. And
their whiskers.
Feel their whiskers on the back of your neck as you're running. But then you see it light from ahead, light coming in around the trap door that you know is at the top of the ladder. And you can see the ladder. And you leap for it in those last few feet, and you start scrambling up it. And again, just a glance back, and you see their massed forms in the darkness, just bits and pieces of them here and there as the light from the trap door shines on them. And then one of the rungs gives way, snapping.
Oh, no.
And you fall back into them.
Oh, God damn it. I almost made it. Oh, God.
But then...
Yep, that's what I land on.
Then the trapdoor is flung open. Light streams down into the space. And then Anton's voice comes down. And he yells, "Back in the name of the forces of goodness and light." And he shoves a torch, an actual light, down into the darkness, and it flares, and it flares, and to the point where no normal torch could do so. It sparks and fizzes, and light just fills everywhere down here, and the rat creatures bolt off in all directions.
He's reaching it down into the passageway, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, he's kind of leaning down into the hole, shoving the torch down.
Take it from him as if he was offering it to me, and, run a few feet and waving it after them, yeah, get on.
I think it's a little bit too high for you to do that, but he sees you reaching for it, and he can toss it down to you, and in that same motion almost. And
I'm like, Anton, calm down. Someone's hurt.
All right, so we can just do a quickie wrap up because the rat things vanish into the corridors from whence they came. You are able to retrieve Edgar, who is still alive, but infected with some pretty nasty things. The same things you're infected with, because that's what it appears that they were doing. They were wanting to. It appears that they were wanting to incite a plague, to instigate a plague in the city, and they were doing that by abducting, the stage manager, and then you came down, and then that was going to give them the impetus they needed to start a nasty little plague. But the magics of the Barbazines is able to cure that fairly quickly. Once it's figured out what happens, there's a few bad days of sickness.
Yes.
On your and Edgar's part.
I have also had all of my vaccines, if vaccines exist at this point in history.
Although the rat things themselves are not able to be hunted down, the access that they got from the catacombs into the underworld of the opera house are sealed up.
I suggest marking them also with quicklime. They don't seem to like that.
This suggestion is considered and judged to not be a bad one. And in fact, you have kind of gone up in the eyes of the sect here, of the Barbazine, because you have shown yourself capable on your own. I mean, as capable as anyone could expect you to be.
Rad.
The Gothic Podcast is produced by C. Patrick Nagel, with theme music by Zoe Hovland and cover artwork by Jared George Art. Listen to the Gothic Podcast on Podbean or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow The Gothic Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, or email us at thegothic.podcast@gmail.com. Support for The Gothic Podcast comes from you, our listeners, so please visit our Patreon page. Thanks.